Today on Hearts of Heroes, a tornado rips through a small suburb in central Alabama,
By the time it was on top of us, we didn't even make it into our basement.
leaving a man trapped under his demolished home.
And then get to the house, and it almost looks collapsed in on itself.
It'll take an entire team of first responders and a daring medical rescue to save his life.
You could literally feel the whole house shift. And so everybody started screaming, no!
The task at hand for these first responders, do everything to save lives. Strong tornadoes can cause inconceivable damage, destroying homes, buildings, and almost anything in their path. Fortunately, after they strike, help is always on the way.
And for one Alabama family, it would take a virtual army of nurses, doctors, and firefighters to pull a father of three out from under the crushing debris.
Just outside of Birmingham, Alabama, you'll find the small suburb of Fultondale. Population, just under 10,000.
It's a growing city, but it still has that small town feel. You kind of know everybody. You grew up with everybody around here.
And that sense of community is what brought Eloisa Concepcion and her husband Arnaldo to move to Fultondale 13 years ago.
Ven alguna familia necesitada o así, y pues todos ahí, ¿qué es lo que necesita? ¿Te podemos ayudar en algo?
And that desire to help out your neighbors is shared by the heroes of Fultondale's fire department.
We're called the Friendly City, and we like to show that through our service to the city.
While you can always count on a friendly wave from a neighbor, you can also count on severe storms in the southeast. Alabama can get a tornado any month of the year.
We've had them in December, we've had them in January, even had them in the fall. The weather here is so random that anytime's tornado season to me.
It's just one of those things that can show up the blink of an eye, and they're gone in the blink of an eye. You just got to always be prepared for it.
Preparation is key because once the warning's out, a twister can hit furiously fast.
It's on top of you quick with no warning. It maybe lasts 30, 40 seconds max. It seems like a lifetime sitting there waiting for it to pass.
But on January 25th, 2020, like almost all days that turn tornadic, the weather started clear.
It was kind of a mixed weather day. Kind of cool, kind of hot, kind of sticky in the air. Like, you could feel it was conducive for storms, not necessarily tornadoes. Nobody really thought that it was gonna happen that day.
As always, the heat of the day and all the dynamics that make tornadoes come together did just that. And by that evening, the severe storms started popping.
I had actually went to sleep that night, earlier than I usually do, and then I got a phone call from my dad letting me know that there was a tornado signature heading our way.
As Brandon rushed in to warn his wife and kids, the storm hit.
Transformers were exploding outside, wind was blowing through the window hard, and by the time it was on top of us, we didn't even make it into our basement. We just huddled down into the hallway. It had gotten so bad outside.
Across town, Eloisa and Arnaldo also must have missed that tornado watch that had been issued. They say that they had no idea how powerful the storm had grown.
Sí estaba lluvioso, pero no se escuchaban así que iba a venir un tornado feo.
Arnaldo went outside and saw the storm. It was headed directly for them. He and Eloisa quickly got their three kids and tried to get down to the basement.
Recuerdo yo que esa noche sí sonaron las alarmas, pero en el momento que estaban sonando las alarmas ya el tornado lo teníamos encima. O sea, fue segundos, no fueron minutos, fueron segundos.
Eloisa tried to open the basement door, but there was a safety chain.
Entonces yo me tardé en abrir porque es una cadena que uno le tiene que, hacerle, muy despacio para poder atinarle, pero ya con los nervios y todo, ahí fue donde yo me tardé. Y ahí fue donde
Eloisa was finally able to unchain the door, but Arnaldo and his 6-year-old daughter were still in the hallway.
Fue cuando la tumbó la puerta y así fue como ellas salieron, pero yo ya no pude salir con mi niña.
Suddenly, the whole house crashed down on them.
Ya en ese momento sentí cuando, que nos cayó como el techo, no sé ni exactamente qué fue lo que nos cayó, pero, o sea, cuando cayó todo lo de la insulación, todo.
Coming up, first responders face a distressing rescue scene.
We tried everything. We just ran out of options real quick.
But first, this safety tip.
Tornadoes travel fast. If a warning is issued for your neighborhood, seek shelter immediately.
If you can, get to the basement or the lowest level of your building. Stay away from windows and have as many walls between yourself and the outside as possible.
Remember that staying alert and prepared can save you and your loved ones during a natural disaster.
On the evening of January 25th, 2021, a tornado ripped through Fultondale, Alabama, destroying homes and buildings.
It got real loud. People call it like a train. That's really what it feels like. Everything starts shaking. You know something's going on, not exactly sure till you look outside when it's done.
Medic and firefighter Brandon Fuller was at home with his family when the twisters started torturing Fultondale. It all happened so fast, they didn't even have time to get to their basement.
We got to the basement door and it was so bad outside. At that point, I said, let's just, huddle down right here in the hallway.
Fortunately, the tornado avoided them, and once Brandon knew that his family was safe, he was off to help others.
I kind of looked at my wife and I said, I'm gonna go up to the station. We got hit hard and I'm gonna see what I can do.
These first responders often live in the areas struck by disaster, so they not only have to make sure their own families are safe, they have to look out for the safety of the entire community.
Meanwhile, Eloisa Concepcion made her way out of the basement and found her home almost destroyed. While her 6-year-old daughter was safe, her husband Ronaldo was on the stairway, trapped face down under heavy debris.
Pero ya cuando tratábamos de sacábamos escombros, no salían, entonces yo, o sea, en mi cabeza yo decía, bueno, ¿qué puede ser algo tan duro que no lo puede dejar?
The twister had uprooted a massive tree, sending it crashing down onto their home. Arnaldo's legs were pinned under its weight.
Entonces fue cuando yo medio volteé así, ya vi que estaba el árbol acá sobre mi espalda.
Eloisa and Arnaldo could do nothing but call 911 and wait for first responders.
Fue una angustia, una impotencia de verlos ahí, de no poder ayudarlos.
Within minutes, firefighter and medics Brandon Sharp and Brandon Fuller were dispatched to the scene, but they couldn't get there. The roads were a mess.
I grew up in the city and I couldn't even recognize the street when we got there. We actually couldn't get up to the road just because of the amount of damage throughout the roadway. So we stopped and from there we hoofed it up the hill.
We're going under trees, over trees just to get to the house and then get to the house and it's almost looks collapsed in on itself.
When they finally arrived, they knew that this would be a rescue like no other they'd ever done.
There was only probably maybe 3 or 4 walls that were still standing in the structure. The entire roof had caved in, and I finally made it to him, and he was kind of laid face first right at the top of his stairs to the basement, and the tree was on top of his left leg.
The tree at least came up to my chest, and I'm 5'10", and then I just looked at the tree and just kind of pondered at the tree, like, what are we gonna do with that?
Everybody who showed up could see how dangerous the situation was.
The structure was completely unstable when we got there. I immediately told the family if they could just to kind of wait outside.
Medics gave Arnaldo an IV and then put a tourniquet around his leg to slow the bleeding. But the most pressing question was, how are they going to get this tree off of him?
We first considered using a device called airbags to lift the tree up. Because of the structural integrity of the house, we realized that wasn't an option. It would put too much stress on the floor and cause a potential collapse.
So we were trying to dig a hole around his leg just to see if we couldn't push his leg in and out, but nothing we did at that point was working.
Even the heavy rescue crew, with their specialized equipment, could not come up with a viable plan.
They said there's nothing we could do with that tree without compromising the house. So at that point, we realized we didn't have an option from our skill set anymore.
Coming up, the rescue calls for a gutsy medical procedure performed in the most dangerous of situations.
You could literally feel the whole house shift to the left, and so everybody started screaming, no!
In January of 2020, a tornado sent an enormous tree crashing into a suburban Alabama home. Inside was a man, a father of 3, and he was injured. First responders found themselves running out of options.
Now, they would have to turn to a different group of heroes, doctors and nurses, to save the man's life. But with the home dangerously unstable, it would require a daring medical rescue.
First responders valiantly tried everything they could to get Arnaldo out from under the tree. But they were in a race against time in 2 ways. Arnaldo needed immediate medical attention. Plus, there was no telling how much longer the house was going to stay standing.
The main concern I was worried about was any other secondary collapses that could ultimately hurt Mr. Vasquez even more.
So they got in touch with the staff of the University of Alabama Birmingham Medical Center for backup.
We picked up the phone, talked to him, and was like, what are you guys needing? They were needing nurses and blood.
Nurse India Alford, along with fellow nurse Sherikia Hardy, jumped in an ambulance and raced to Arnaldo. When they got there, police were surprised to see that medical staff had shown up.
And he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, we've got blood. And they're like, let us get you up there.
Once they got to Arnaldo, the nurses saw how desperate the situation was.
That was the worst part of it for me, was looking at him and just knowing that he was trapped. And I just made eye contact with him at that moment and, told him, like, we're gonna help you.
These brave nurses not only put their safety on the line to help Arnaldo, they also took the time to show him compassion and keep him calm.
The nurses did all they could, but it was clear that something more drastic needed to be done to save his life.
We assessed the patient, came back down, talked to the firemen and said, what are our options? That's when we kind of decided at that point there was really just no pulling him out. There was no trying to lift.
So they reached out to Dr. Blake Gibson at the University Trauma Center.
After multiple phone calls, it became clear that they had exhausted all of their resources and that we were really going to have to consider an in-field amputation.
Performing an amputation outside of a hospital is extremely rare and something that had never been done in this area before.
I thought they were joking. I mean, that's Hollywood stuff. That don't happen in the field. As far as I know, that's the first recorded one in the Southeast.
They're not only rare, they're also extremely dangerous.
You get concerned about the cleanliness of the environment and if you're going to have any major infectious source from doing an amputation. And then also you have less control over bleeding.
But they really had no other choice. Dr. Gibson and trauma surgeon Dr. Don Reef headed to the scene.
Actually, I drove myself out there to Fultondale, but arranged out the instruments and some of the stuff we were going to need to perform the procedure at the scene by the time I got there.
When Dr. Reef arrived, everybody started prepping for the emergency operation, all while watching closely the part of the house that was still precariously standing above them.
The scene commander, he started yelling. He's like, guys, this building's getting really unsafe. We're at a 6 out of 10. And Dr. Gibson yells, is that a good 6 or a bad 6? And he's like, a bad 6.
With no time to lose, Dr. Reef started the amputation.
I placed 2 fresh tourniquets, made them as tight and as secure and as high as I could, and then basically began the surgical procedure at that point at the lowest level to preserve the most limb that we could of his leg that was exposed.
Everybody pitched in, including the Fultondale medics. They all helped Dr. Reef.
Throughout the operation, I was helping Dr. Reef with medical tools they needed when they were running out of my bag, just assisting the best I could from that point.
He needed a light, and we couldn't get a flashlight to where he was, so I had to climb on top of the tree above Dr. Reef so he could perform the operation with just a flashlight on my phone.
But during the procedure, the home was becoming increasingly more unstable.
Somebody actually went up on the 2nd floor with a chainsaw, and they were gonna try to cut some pieces of the tree, and you could literally feel the whole house shift to the left. And so everybody started screaming, no! And so they stopped with the chainsaw.
At that point, the fire captain told them that the 6 out of 10 safety concern had gotten even worse.
As we're sitting there, he's like, we're at about an 8 out of 10.
Really, it was just one of those moments that, we're so focused on the patient that we were trying to be safe, but our safety wasn't the primary concern.
Despite the increasing danger, this team of brave doctors, nurses, and firefighters put their own safety on the line. Working together as a team, they were determined to make sure Mr. Vasquez made it out alive.
Once the operation started, it really only took a matter of minutes, thanks to the incredible teamwork of everybody on hand.
It was seamless. I think that it was a bunch of really great professionals who all know their job very well and who are comfortable working in stressful situations and who put the mission before everything else.
While they did manage to get Arnaldo out from under the tree, he still needed to get to the hospital.
I went ahead and prepared everything we were going to need in the ambulance because the surgery doesn't stop. It's at that point. We then have to take care of him until he gets to the hospital.
And none of them were out of the woods yet. Coming up, the medical team takes a harrowing ambulance ride.
We're literally just laying on his leg trying to keep it from bleeding.
But first, another safety tip.
Did you know it takes just 12 inches of moving water to carry away a small vehicle?
It is safest not to drive during bad weather if possible. But if you are ever caught in a storm and encounter a flooded road, do not attempt to cross.
In the event of a flood, taking the time to turn around and find a safer route might just save your life. Turn around, don't drown.
Doctors, nurses, and EMTs had just performed an emergency amputation to get Arnaldo Vasquez from under a fallen tree. But his life was still in danger. He had to get to the hospital fast to survive.
It is extraordinarily tense because this was my time when I was directly caring for him, and we started to pull off and then we stopped and we're like, what's happening? They're like, oh, we're stuck on a power line.
And then I was like, oh Lord, please tell me we didn't go through all of this. Make it out of this house that almost collapsed with this patient and we're gonna get stuck on a power line and electrocuted in an ambulance.
They managed to get around that power line, but the streets were just littered with debris. The ambulance had to take a way longer route to the hospital. Arnaldo's situation, meanwhile, just kept getting worse.
His leg started bleeding. We're literally just laying on his leg trying to keep it from bleeding until we could get to the hospital.
Nurse Hardy made a call to the hospital to have an emergency team meet them at the entrance.
And so they came and met us out of the ambulance bay, grabbed him, and by that time my arms were like spaghetti noodles because I literally had been holding pressure to that for that long.
We were all like standing right beside each other, and that was that first time that we took a breath of like, we got him here, we made it.
The emotions just kind of flooded over me and I had to like walk off and just go shed a few tears. Like I'm literally getting emotional about it right now.
Once they handed Arnaldo off, Dr. Reef completed the procedure at the trauma center.
We took him to the operating room and washed out the amputation site. And then approximately 48 hours later, I want to say we went on to revise it and close his amputation site.
This whole thing was not easy for anybody involved in the incredible rescue. But months later, with the support of his family, Arnaldo has made a full recovery, and he's now fitted with an artificial leg. Recently, Arnaldo and his family were able to meet the heroic team that saved this father's life.
It was great to see you. It's great to see you and your family together. I'm proud for you and happy for you, and you're getting around great.
Not often that we get to see the outcome after we get involved with any patients. And you know, when I first got to you, it had me a little worried as far as getting you out, but I'm glad they sent a great team of doctors down there with us, and I'm glad you're doing awesome. I really am. I'm happy for you and your family.
So good to know that you're doing better and your children and your family are, it's so good to see their smiling faces and see you getting around and doing so well, and it's just an absolute blessing and pleasure to be able to help take care of you.
Como dicen, teníamos que echarle ganas. Y gracias a los doctores, gracias a toda la gente por sus oraciones, por su apoyo, a nuestros familiares, vecinos que siempre han estado ahí. Gracias, de verdad que gracias.
Gracias.
I'm glad you're well. It's good to see you, brother.
That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Yep, anytime. Yeah, we're here for you. We're here for all of you, right? All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
For these brave first responders, though, they see a hero in Arnaldo.
So glad you're doing well.
That night, Mr. Vasquez, without realizing it, was a hero for us. Just from the fact that how calm he stayed the whole time, that helped me stay calm as a medic and perform the task I need to perform for him. Almost being a father figure without realizing it. It's just who he is.
Seeing him walking again was honestly the best thing that could have came out of that entire rescue. That's a hero to me.
days, you don't really hear about doctors making house calls, let alone in a tornado.
And because of their selfless dedication, they, along with the brave firefighters of Fultondale, saved the life of a father in need. And that we can all appreciate.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.